This is a wonderful place to be together on Shabbat morning. Welcome everyone and Shabbat Shalom. So guess what I saw as I left my home this morning on my way to Shul? I might not have noticed it on another week, but this week's Parsha sensitized me to what I saw. A few houses away in my neighborhood, the family put up some beautiful, unusual Christmas decorations. And there were these figures, rather large figures, sculpted out of wire and metal. There were a couple reindeer, but you know what else was there? A large angel. And the angel had its hands extended as a dove of peace was flying away. I love the angel image. The angel also bringing the symbol of peace. But why I bring it up this morning is probably pretty obvious, because angels play an important role in this week's Parsha and in fact in the entire Torah. We know that last week Jacob deceived Esau, his brother, together with his mother. He tricked Esau out of the birthright and the blessing, and now Jacob is on the run. He flees from Beersheba and he camps in the desert. He gathers a stone to lie down upon, and he goes to sleep and he dreams, and his dream is of a stairway, a ladder reaching from the ground to the sky, and on it there are angels of God going up and down. And later in the Torah portion, Jacob tells Leah and Rachel that he has dreamed of an angel who explained to him how he would deal with the flocks that he would be receiving for his advantage. And then again, the Torah ends with a story of an angel protecting Jacob. Angels bring comfort. Angels bring hope. You see, angels are a very significant part of this Parsha, and also they play a very important symbolic role in the religious imagination and religious symbolism. In early Greek and Roman iconographic art, angels are present. And during periods in Renaissance art, angels were very predominant. As an artistic form in our own tradition, Kruvim or cherubim play a role in the building of the ark, in the Mishkan, built in the wilderness, and also used in our holy temple. We're told, "Thou shalt make 2 cherubim of gold, and make 1 cherub at one end and 1 cherub at the other end, and the cherubim shall spread out their wings on high, screening the ark cover with their wings, and their faces should face one another." The space between the faces of angels is an open space. In religious traditions, that open space was where God resided. These images of cherubs were part of other ancient Near Eastern cultures also, and they remain a part of many cultures. To this very day, you know, angels are connected to that Western culture's celebration of love, Valentine's Day. Actually, the Torah contains many, many different places where it mentions angels. Hagar, Sarah's maidservant, flees into the desert, and there's an angel who comforts and counsels her. A couple of weeks ago, we read about angels visiting Abraham and Sarah and giving them the good word that they would have a son. 2 angels visited Lot in Sodom and urged him to escape from the city with his family. And when Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac, Yitzchak, an angel appeared to him and said, "Do not raise your hand against that boy." An angel speaks to Moses out of the burning bush and commands him to return to Egypt to free the Israelites from bondage. Yes, our Torah is full of angels. Most biblical scholars define angels as malachim, and malachim means the same thing as messengers. For a malach carries a message. Belief in angels was very common amongst people in the ancient Mideast. Is it just folly? Is it just pretend? Or is there something in this? I gather subjectively that many people still have their angels or believe in angels. It was assumed that angels could fly. They often had wings. They could walk, talk, appear, and disappear, and they were designated as being messengers from God. Within Jewish tradition, angels were believed to be slightly superior to human beings, and they worked as God's agents. It was almost as if angels exist somewhere between the divine and the human, between heaven and earth. In the book of Psalms, the psalmist references angels when asking the question of God. Oh God, what is man that you are mindful of him? What is a mortal being that you would take note of him? And then the psalmist indicates that, God, you made him little lower than angels. You see, angels exist somewhere between God and man. Some rabbis taught that God actually consulted with angels before he created human beings. It's their response to a difficult passage or notion in the beginning of the book of Genesis, where God says, let us make a human being. Let us make a human being. It's part of the initial creative process. But the question that's raised is, who is us? And a part of our history of commentary says, us is God speaking to the angels. It's interesting that there are those who claim that angels live only for one day. They're created in the morning, they praise God throughout the day, and they die in the evening. In the Midrash, we learn that this is actually the source of this prayer that we're going to sing in a little while, the one that evokes the most energy here, the Kedusha. Naritzcha v'nakdishcha kesod sarfei kodesh. We revere and sanctify you on earth as your name is hallowed in heaven, sung by the celestial choirs, the choirs of angels. And then what's in this prayer, you'll take a note in a few minutes. It's a metaphoric conversation between celestial choirs, angels, who call to one another in song and go back and forth. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot. How holy is the God of hosts? And the angelic chorus asks, Aye mekom kevodo. Where is God's glory? And the angels respond, Baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo. God's glory is found throughout the universe. It was also believed that angels accompany Jews at the beginning of Shabbos when they walk home from synagogue. Often it was dangerous to walk from shul to home. And so they get home and sing Shalom Aleichem Malachei HaShalom. Welcome, you angels of peace, you who protected me on this journey. Undoubtedly, all these are flights of fancy, mystical creations of a vision. So let's come back to earth. The medieval philosopher, the rationalist, Maimonides, was a physician, a scientist, a Jewish scholar and leader. He had to deal with the question, so what are these angels? And he saw them as a form of intelligence through which God ruled the world. It's the human mind, according to Rambam, where the angel exists. He taught that if God wished to send a message to a human being, then it was sent through a person's thought, a person's intelligence. For Rambam, human minds were containers of God's signals and signs, and that is why he called them malachim. A wonderful way that God spoke to human beings, and then through that he could inspire human beings to think about new ideas, things that weren't thought of before, and create new visions. I like this idea a lot because it makes angels real in the sense that they're dependent on our minds, or perhaps it's a language given for our minds' openness, perceptions, and capacity to envision a future. For the ancients in many cultures, angels were as real as people are. Modern teachers claim that ancient authors used angels as a dramatic way to express inner thoughts or characters, perhaps something that could be expressed on the couch with a psychoanalyst. In our Torah portion, the author may have wished to portray Jacob's fear of leaving his homeland, his fear of going to an unknown, distant future. And so there was a stairway in the dream, and it stretched from earth to heaven, and there were angels going up and down, depicting his anxiety about the future. Will his future go up, or will his fortunes go down? Would he be a success or a failure? Would God help him and protect him from evil? There are two roles of angels in the Torah, and both prove helpful. At times, an angel will simply appear as a messenger, and at other times as a form of insight and intelligence. They add excitement to the text. They give it a different dimension. They add color. And the Torah tradition then becomes something of a religious experience. So I cannot talk about angels, and I'm not going to end this conversation without sharing with you my own experience of an angel. I didn't realize as I had that experience that I had met an angel. And the experience came to me as a sign at a very, very important moment in my life, at a transitional moment shortly before I was ordained as a rabbi. And I've never forgotten it, and it always serves me as a reminder of what my priorities have to be as a rabbi, as a teacher of this tradition, and what's important to me, and what should always remain important to me. I know that some of you here have heard me tell this story before, but it's important that I repeat it for everyone else, because every time I think about angels, I think about this experience. You want to hear about it? So I was in my very last year of rabbinical school with just a few months left. It was December, and it was time for me to take my Talmud orals. I was taking a train from where I lived in central New Jersey into Manhattan. The Talmud oral exams at that time were a moment in the life of every senior rabbinic student that evoked terror. Because the young student, the graduating rabbi, after having learned 26 pages, dapim of Talmud, both sides, had to sit with a great Talmudic scholar, and you had to learn every word of those pages, the Mishnah, the Gemara, all of the commentaries, and you would sit with this scholar, and you weren't able to open the book. And he could ask you anything about those 26 pages. When I look back at it, I realized it was cruel and unusual punishment. But at least I learned 26 pages of Talmud. So it was a particularly cold, snowy morning as I got on the train in central Jersey. And I knew the train car would fill up. And so I knew also that I needed to have extra space because I was going to cram for this exam while I was traveling into Manhattan. I think I had been up all night, and I knew that it would be beneficial to go over it one last time, although now the studies show it doesn't help to do that. So at each stop on the train, before Newark, more people came on. There were 2 stops before Newark, and then I was going into Manhattan. So there was a guy who got on the train, a guy with an old nappy woolen cap, torn, dirty woolen jacket, and both of his feet were wrapped in plastic bags. He was unshaven. There was 1 seat left on the train car, and of course, it was the seat next to me. He sat down, and I kind of pulled my book over. It was a large Gemara, and I tried to read it in a rather limited space. I didn't want to look up. I didn't want him to be sitting there. He looked dirty, and it appeared that he would be in my space, and I was totally focused on wanting to learn the text one last time. Just a couple minutes pass by, and he leans over me, and he says, "What is that?" And I say, "This is the Talmud." And he says, what are the words? What are the letters? What language is it in? I say, it's Hebrew and Aramaic. And he says to me, you Jewish? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, fill in the blank. And then he asked me, you know the Katzes? And I said to him, I know some Katzes. Who are you referring to? And he said, you know, the Katzes from Montreal. And then he went on and says to me, they's Kohanim. I said, yeah, no, all Katzes are Kohanim. And he said, yeah, they work in the temple. And I said, in Montreal? And he said, no, in Yerushalayim. I was somewhere at that point between being absolutely fascinating and also being annoyed because I wasn't able to do what I wanted to be doing. And I said to him, you know, the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed 2,000 years ago. That's why I'm studying this Talmud. And he said, no. I said, yeah. He was genuinely disturbed by the news that the temple was destroyed. It made him really sad because he knew that the temple played a central role in the life of our people. He took a breath and then he turns to me and he says, Ech korim lecha, ma shlomcha? What's your name? He said. How are you? In Hebrew. And I said, Beseder. And then he said, Sprechen Sie bissel Yiddish? And I said, unfortunately not. And then he began to riff on in Yiddish. And he said, it's a shame you don't know that language. And I was astounded because I knew that this homeless, impoverished black man was speaking perfect Yiddish to me. I didn't understand it. And then he says to me, young man, do you know what this means? Hillel haya omer, im ein ani li mili, uksha'ani latzmi ma'ani, ve'im lo matai. He paused, and I nodded. It's from Pirkei Avot. Hillel taught, if I'm not for myself, who am I? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? The train pulled into the Newark station. He got up and he said, God bless you, and he walked away. Sounds like a dream sequence, doesn't it? It could have been a dream, but it wasn't. It was so strange, and it was so discordant between this man and what he looked like, and then what he said, and ultimately what he knew. And it struck me. It struck me that I didn't want him to sit in that empty seat, nor did I invite him. It struck me that I wasn't friendly to him. I wasn't inviting to him. It struck me that I engaged in a conversation with him only hesitantly. And I know that that's not me, but my Torah study pulled me away from that which was essentially human. It pulled me away from connecting to this person who needed connection. I may have been the only person that he had connected with for days. Who knew? And I learned a powerful lesson, a lesson on my way to my Talmud final. The lesson was very clear. It's a lesson about Derech Eretz and the role that Derech Eretz plays in our lives, in our religious lives, and where Derech Eretz stands in relation to the learning and ultimately the living of Torah. The rabbis have taught Derech Eretz Kedma LeTorah. You know what that means? It means that human decency, human respect, that precedes the learning of Torah. More than that, the value system that we have inherited tells us that our capacity to show compassion to all human beings, respect for all human beings, understanding to all human beings is more important than anything we busy ourselves learning. And so I end with this because I have spent the last 40 years believing that this fellow was an angel an angel who came to remind me of something I knew and had forgotten. This rather large and messy-looking, seemingly homeless man with plastic bags for boots came to teach me the most important Torah for that day as I prepared for my Talmud final. But not just for that day, for all times, because it did become my priority as a rabbi and as a Jew. Derech Eretz Kedma Torah. There was a moment where I understood that I had to be present in the human interaction. And although I have not always been, I certainly try to be, even though I often fall short. So the angels stand somewhere between earth and heaven, and they can be very earthly. But they come to teach us very important messages. Our minds have to be open to those messages and to the angels in our lives. I hope you've had some, and I hope you value the angels in your life. And I hope that you and I meet many more. Shabbat Shalom.